We all know the image. It is perhaps the most famous photograph of the 20th century. New York City, 1954. A white pleated dress swirls upward, caught in the gust of a subway grate. A woman laughs, her head thrown back, eyes closed in what looks like pure, unadulterated joy. In that moment, Marilyn Monroe wasn't just a woman, she was a goddess. She was the peak of Hollywood glamour, an untouchable icon of desire. But if you look closer, beyond the blinding flashbulbs of the paparazzi, you'll see the cracks. That night, while the world was falling in love with her, a shadow was looming. Her husband, Joe DiMaggio, was watching from the sidelines. He wasn't proud. He was fuming. To him, the scene was a display of indecency. Behind the scenes, that iconic moment of glamour triggered a violent outburst in their hotel room just hours later. This is the tragedy of Marilyn Monroe. Every time she gave the world a masterpiece, she paid for it in bruises, either on her skin or on her soul. You think you know her story. You know the brand. You know the red lipstick and the platinum blonde curls. But you don't know Norma Jeane. Today, we are going to tear down the posters and look at the girl who lived behind the mask. Before the diamonds, there was the dust. Norma Jeane Mortensen didn't have a childhood. She had a survival marathon. Born in a charity ward, she was a girl defined by absence. Her mother was lost in the fog of schizophrenia, and her father was nothing more than a ghost in a photograph. Norma Jeane grew up in 12 different foster homes. She was moved like a piece of furniture, told she was sinful, and faced the unspeakable horror of abuse. This trauma left her with a lifelong stutter and a desperate, aching need to be loved. By age 16, she married just to avoid an orphanage. She became a war bride, spraying airplane parts in a factory. That's where the camera found her. A photographer told her she was the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen. For a girl told she was nothing, those words were a spark. The transition to Marilyn was a brilliant transformation. She dyed her hair pillowcase white and practiced a breathy whisper to hide her stutter. She didn't just become an actress. She became an architect. She built Marilyn Monroe brick by brick, layer by layer, until the world couldn't see Norma Jeane anymore. But the building became a prison. She once said Marilyn was a veil she wore, and people were disappointed when they saw who was underneath. Hollywood tried to bury a simple fact. Marilyn was brilliant. The dumb blonde was her greatest performance. While the press mocked her, she owned a library of 400 books, studying Dostoevsky, Whitman, and Freud. She had a genius-level IQ, but was forced to play a caricature for tickets. In 1955, she walked away from it all. She moved to New York, studied at the Actors Studio, and became the first woman to start her own production company. In an era of peak sexism, she demanded better pay and creative control, and she won. She was also a rebel for others. When the Mocambo Club refused to book Ella Fitzgerald because of her race, Marilyn made a deal. She promised to sit in the front row every night if they let Ella sing. She used her own fame as a shield for a friend. This was the real Marilyn, a woman who used her objectification as a weapon for good. But love remained her greatest battle. With Joe DiMaggio, she wanted stability, but he wanted a trophy. With Arthur Miller, she wanted an intellectual equal. But she found his diary, where he wrote he was disappointed in her. Imagine being the most desired woman on earth, and the man you love thinks you aren't smart enough for his social circle. This was the moment her slow-motion suicide truly began. She turned to pills and champagne to numb the loneliness. By the 1960s, the veil was tearing. The happy birthday song for JFK wasn't a celebration. It was a breakdown wrapped in sequins. She was a pawn in a political game, eventually seen as a liability by the men in power. The final 24 hours of her life remain a mystery. August 5th, 1962, found face down, clutching a phone, alone in a house she hadn't even unpacked. Marilyn Monroe has been dead for over 60 years. Yet she haunts us still. We've turned her into a t-shirt and a painting. But we should not only remember the beauty, we must remember the warrior. She wasn't a victim. She was a woman who ran out of strength after fighting an industry that tried to crush her. Rest in peace, Norma Jeane. The world finally knows your name. But more importantly, we are finally starting to understand your heart.